The fifth man I'll be introducing today is actually the last samurai. The real last samurai, I should say, not Tom Cruise. 皆さんこんにちは and welcome to Let's Ask Shogo. If you have studied about samurai or Japanese history before, it's impossible to not know about the unique culture, Seppuku. While most people understand it as just a way of suicide of samurai cutting their stomachs, it actually had many other meanings. For example, avoiding the shame of being killed by an enemy, taking the responsibility of a loss or mistake to protect your subordinates and family, and stating your last declaration in exchange for your life. Although I've made a few videos talking about seppuku, it's very difficult to understand what it truly was, because the situation of each samurai was of course different. So today, as a katana trainee and a student of Japanese history, I will introduce the stories of 5 most famous men who existed during the samurai era and have committed seppuku. Because these men are so famous in Japan, I'm sure this video will help you with your communication with Japanese people, or to deepen your understanding towards popular subculture. And even if you get confused somewhere during the middle, that's okay. I will wrap everything up again at the end of the video in today's conclusion. それでは本日も参りましょう。1. Minamoto-no-Yoshitsune. Minamoto-no-Yoshitsune is the younger brother of Minamoto-no-Yoritomo, who is the samurai that established the first Kamakura shogunate, the samurai government. How Yoshitsune had to end his own life is said to be the saddest event in Japanese history. The samurai, who were originally just warriors that protected the lands of aristocrats, eventually began to be hired by the imperial family to become their soldiers for defense. Eventually, the strength of the samurai that the imperial family owned literally became their authority, which led to them giving the samurai too much power. Some samurai clans started to defeat other samurai and bring them in as they grew stronger. And in the end, the 2 families that fought over ruling Japan were Heiji and Genji. Genji lost to Heiji once, and the father of the brothers, Yoritomo and Yoshitsune, was killed in battle. Although Yoshitsune was captured and taken to a temple in Kyoto to be raised as a monk, he ran away when he grew up to train as a warrior. Eventually, he finds out that his older brother, Yoritomo, was going to start a war with Heiji again, so he joined the group to fight alongside him. Although Yoshitsune did not have that much experience on the battlefield, he was a genius in tactics, and he won the 4 major battles against the Heiji family. Finally, they won the war thanks to Yoshitsune, and his older brother succeeded in establishing the first shogunate ever in Japanese history. Wow, then Yoshitsune must have been rewarded and have lived a happy life from there. I think that's what most of you might imagine. However, the tragedy of Yoshitsune's life starts here. Once Yoshitsune's popularity started to rise after the victory of the war, his older brother Yoritomo became jealous and also cautious of his influences among the administration. The relationship between the brothers became worse and worse, until finally Yoritomo sent out orders to his subordinates to capture him. At once, Yoshitsune tried to fight with his brother, but he was betrayed by everyone who he fought together through the wars, because they were afraid of the shogun. Very few of his men fought to their death to protect their lord. But in the end, Yoshitsune had nowhere to run and killed himself to die with honor. This is a super famous story that every Japanese person would 100% learn in history class. And there are still many plays in traditional theater art, like kabuki and no theater about him and his sad story. 2. Oda Nobunaga. The first Kamakura shogunate was overthrown due to the confusion caused by the Mongolian invasion in 1333, and the second Muromachi shogunate was established. However, the Muromachi shogunate also soon began to lose its power due to internal conflict, and the samurai leaders of each region stood up to become the next leader of Japan. Out of all the powerful and ferocious warrior lords, there was one man that was called the Devil. He is Oda Nobunaga, the first samurai of the three heroes of the Sengoku era, and the most famous and popular samurai throughout history. His family was originally from a low samurai class in the countryside, but he soon started to show his talents and charisma as he led his army to many victories. He was the one who overthrew the Muromachi shogunate in 1573 too. If something would get in his way, he would not hesitate to kill Buddhist monk warriors and burn down temples, and even attack commoners who were not even warriors, which led to him being called the Devil today. However, as I've explained in my past videos, Oda Nobunaga is also famous for making Japan rich by promoting foreign trade and distribution within the country, and also helping culture like tea ceremony and sumo to grow in Japan. So he wasn't just a violent monster, but a smart strategist. After about 100 years have passed since the Sengoku era started, Oda Nobunaga was almost about to rule all of Japan. He just had to win a few more battles with some samurai clans. However, this is when the tragedy happens. One of his four most trusted subordinates, Akechi Mitsuhide, betrayed him. Mitsuhide's huge army attacked the temple where Oda Nobunaga was staying at, and many warriors were sent into the building to kill him. Oda Nobunaga only had a small group of men protecting him, and Akechi Mitsuhide eventually sent fire to the temple, and there was no way to run. Oda Nobunaga chose to end his own life and not take the shame of being killed by the enemy's sword. Possibly the strongest and smartest samurai of Japanese history did not live to see the day his dearest wish of ruling all of Japan come true. 3. Shimizu Muneharu. Out of the 5 men I introduced in this video, this man is surely the least known samurai. Then why is he on the list? It is because he is actually the one that created the culture of seppuku, being a noble way for a warrior to die with dignity. And his manners of how he committed seppuku became the model of the formalized death penalty in the following Edo period. Let's take a closer look at the story of this man who created the seppuku image we have today. As I've explained earlier, Oda Nobunaga was almost about to conquer all of Japan, but the Shikoku region was one of the places he had not won yet. The second samurai of the 3 heroes of the Sengoku era, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, who will eventually rule all of Japan for the first time in history, was still Oda Nobunaga's subordinate at that time, and he was responsible for finding and winning the lands. Shimizu Muneharu was the lord of the Takamatsu castle in Okayama prefecture, but his castle was literally flooded by Hideyoshi, and he and his men were not able to run. Hideyoshi demanded to hand over most of all the land they had, and Shimizu Muneharu to commit seppuku. Shimizu Muneharu and his men of course refused this demand, but were starting to starve and die. Then one day, shocking news reaches Hideyoshi, the death of his lord, Oda Nobunaga. He knew that he immediately needed to return to Kyoto to defeat Akechi Mitsuhide, the traitor, so that he could become the next leader after Oda Nobunaga. As he kept the death of his lord a secret to the enemies, he said, "I will not ask for the land anymore. If only Shimizu Muneharu kills himself, I will let the others free." Shimizu Muneharu and his men were all very surprised by the sudden generous offer, not knowing that Hideyoshi's true intentions were to end this battle as soon as possible so he can return to the capital. While many of his people opposed the offer, many were beginning to die and there was no hope of help nor winning. Shimizu Muneharu rejected the voices of his people and accepted the offer. He rowed a small boat out to the water that was flooding his castle. As his men and his enemies watched him, he manfully cut his stomach to kill himself. Historical records say that Hideyoshi, who watched him die, shed some tears as he said, "Shimizu Muneharu is a true samurai." After this event, Hideyoshi often demanded the leader of his enemy to commit seppuku to protect their men, which eventually created the culture of seppuku, being a noble death with dignity among the samurai. 4. Sen-no-Rikyu. While all the other 4 men were samurai, this man was actually a merchant. But he was not just a merchant. He was the Grand Master that completed the tea ceremony culture we know of today. A man that every Japanese person would know. How did a tea master end up committing seppuku to end his life though? Let's take a look at his story too. Rikyu was born in a merchant's family in Osaka and became a Zen monk when he was 18 years old. There he finds out that the culture of drinking tea in the form of a ceremony is becoming more and more popular. He started to train under his master to learn the ways of wabicha, which was a simple and sophisticated tea ceremony where people can practice Zen. Eventually, because his master passed away when he was young, Rikyu soon became the leading person of tea ceremony culture. Meanwhile, the devil, Oda Nobunaga, was gaining more and more power as he defeated other samurai clans and monk soldiers in their temples. Oda Nobunaga knew that in order to force the army of barbaric samurai to obey him, he needed to give them some kind of reward for their achievements. However, he learned through history that giving subordinates land will always cause conflicts, and that at some point there will be no more rewards to give. This is when he thought up the idea to use the tea ceremony culture politically, making the prices of the tea utensils unbelievably expensive, and only letting men who he gave permission to do tea ceremonies. His plan succeeded perfectly, as many samurai would easily risk their lives to obtain a bowl or a small matcha tea container, and they would shed tears of joy when they were finally allowed to hold a ceremony. You might have thought before, why the heck is drinking a cup of tea so important to Japanese people? Now you know the answer. However, we must understand that behind Nobunaga's success, there was a man that taught him tea and judged which tea utensils were good or bad for him to sell. Yes, this man was Sen-no-Rikyu. After Nobunaga's death, he even helped Toyotomi Hideyoshi to become the first samurai to rule all of Japan. Rikyu worked for 2 of the 3 heroes of the Sengoku era, and he continued to raise his position in the administration. However, as we learned from the first samurai, Yoshitsune, who became too powerful and was killed by his own brother, Rikyu's attitude also started to catch negative attention from the Lord Hideyoshi. Also the fact that while Rikyu cherished the simple and sophisticated kind of wabi tea ceremony that he was taught from his master, Hideyoshi loved a more fancier and gorgeous style, and their values did not match. The delicate relation between the two finally collapsed when Hideyoshi found out that a wooden statue of Rikyu was placed inside the second floor of the gate of the temple called Daitokushi, Daitoku Temple. This is a famous temple where Nobunaga's funeral was held, and Rikyu had donated the money to build that gate. Are you telling me that I must walk under your statue when I pass these gates? It seems you don't understand your position. No one knows that if it was Rikyu himself or the monks that placed the statue, but in any way he refused to apologize, and Hideyoshi's anger reached a peak. Rikyu was ordered by Hideyoshi to commit seppuku. Rikyu did not hesitate to accept this, and after serving tea to Hideyoshi's subordinates who came to confirm his death, he manfully cut his stomach. The reason why Rikyu, a merchant, was sentenced to seppuku is widely believed that it is because his position within the administration was as high as a samurai. Rikyu didn't give in to power until his death, but he kept his faith to what he believed was beautiful, which made him the legendary tea master he is today. 5. Saigo Takamori. The time period is going to jump all the way to the end of the 19th century, during the last Civil War era in Japan. The fifth man I'll be introducing today is actually the last samurai. The real last samurai, I should say, not Tom Cruise. The end of the 19th century was a turbulent time in Japan, when the US broke the 250 years of isolationism by forcing Japan to open their ports for them to use. This led to the old samurai administration and the union of some samurai clans fighting each other to decide who would lead the new generation of Japan. Saigo Takamori was an army general that led the war against the old shogunate and helped to build the new government during the major restoration in the 19th century. It's no exaggeration to say that Japan would not have been what it is today without him. However, once the control of the new government actually started, they followed the way of Western countries to create a centralized government. They abolished the old class system, took away the autonomy of the prefectures, and prohibited anyone from carrying katana outside. Can you guess who is going to be affected by this the most? Yes, the samurai. These rapid changes within the country meant that the samurai would lose all of their privileges and just be a commoner like everyone else. The anger of the samurai who fought for the future of their country by defeating the old shogunate started to explode, and there were rebellions happening everywhere in Japan. Saigo Takamori was a very compassionate and well-adored man by the samurai, and he was concerned about the lives of these men. He appealed that they should do something to save the former samurai to the other politicians, but they were not going to have a discussion with them about the matter. Our samurai did not die to build a government like this. In the end, Saigo Takamori left the new government that he helped to build and returned to his hometown in Kagoshima Prefecture. He gathered the former samurai families and started his own schools there to teach martial arts, agriculture, and literature to the young to help them have a brighter future. However, the government was afraid of his charisma and influences and constantly tried to keep his schools under surveillance by sending in police officers or stealing gunpowder from their warehouses. Eventually, the anger of the people who looked up to Saigo Takamori exploded, and they started a war against the government. Saigo Takamori led the army of samurai to a war with the new government's army. But there was no way they could win against those who had the newest weaponry they bought from Western countries. They lost almost every battle against them. And in the end, Saigo Takamori and a few of his men were driven back to their Kagoshima castle, completely surrounded by their enemies. Saigo Takamori committed seppuku to end his life. As an excellent military personnel, he must have known there was no match against the new government. However, he chose the path to fight with the people in a weaker position who needed his help. And he died a traitor to the government, but a true hero to the people. Then lastly, today's conclusion. I introduced the stories of 5 most famous men during the samurai era who committed seppuku. 1. Minamoto-no-Yoshitsune. Yoshitsune was the younger brother of Minamoto-no-Yoritomo, who established the first Kamakura shogunate in 1185. He was a talented warrior and leader and helped his brother and his clan to win the war against the strongest enemy. However, his brother eventually became jealous and cautious about his skills and charisma. His older brother ordered his subordinates to kill Yoshitsune, who eventually had nowhere to run but to commit seppuku. 2. Oda Nobunaga. Nobunaga was a very powerful warlord during the Sengoku era that almost conquered all of Japan for the first time in history. However, when he was very close to achieving his goal, he was betrayed by his most trusted subordinate. The temple he was staying at one night was attacked and set on fire by the traitors, and Nobunaga had no choice but to commit seppuku to avoid being killed by his enemy. 3. Shimizu Muneharu. Muneharu is a samurai that created the culture of seppuku being a noble way to die with dignity, and his way of seppuku became the model of the formalized death penalty in the Edo period. When his castle was attacked and flooded by Hideyoshi, there was no other way to protect his men but accept the demand of Hideyoshi, who told him that if he committed seppuku, the other men will be saved. The brave attitude touched the heart of Hideyoshi, and Muneharu was called a real samurai. 4. Sen-no-Rikyu. Rikyu is the Grand Master that completed the tea ceremony culture that exists today. He not only helped Nobunaga to control the people, but also Hideyoshi to become the first samurai to fully conquer Japan. However, Rikyu and Hideyoshi's relationship became worse and worse as their values towards tea separated, and Rikyu's influence in the administration became bigger. Hideyoshi's anger came to a peak one day, and he finally sentenced Rikyu to commit seppuku. Rikyu did not give in to power and manfully cut his stomach, although he was originally a merchant. 5. Saigo Takamori. Saigo was an army general that helped to fight with the old shogunate and build the new government during the Meiji Restoration in the 19th century. However, the new government started to create a centralized system like the Western countries and abolished all the rights that the samurai originally had. Saigo disagreed with these policies and left the new government to start schools in his home city to care for the former samurai. However, the former samurai could not resist the constant pressure from the new government anymore, and finally started a war against them. Saigo and his men lost almost every battle against the new government, and he eventually committed seppuku and died as the last samurai. So that's it for today. Thank you very much for watching. If you thought, I've heard of the names that was introduced in this video today, but now I got to know about them a lot more, please hit the like button to let me know. And my goal is to achieve 1 million subscribers by January 2023, so your help is what I need. In this channel, you can take a closer look at Japanese traditional culture, tips on traveling to Kyoto, and social problems in Japan. So learners and lovers of Japanese language and culture, be sure to subscribe to enjoy more content. And if you'd like to learn more about today's topic, please take a look at my sub-channel Shogo's podcast through the link inside the description box. I have my omake talk there. I would like to talk about the different theories of each story of the man that I introduced today, which I think are super interesting to study about. Thanks again, and I'll see you in my next video. どうもありがとうございました。